Curtis Hanson was a natural to direct L.A. Confidential. Raised in Los Angeles, Hanson was a longtime fan of author James Ellroy. And with films like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle and The River Wild, he had not only shown skill at building tension, but at enough box office success to make a more personal film. The results has won rave reviews. Janet Maslin called L.A. Confidential a tough, gorgeous, vastly entertaining throwback to the Hollywood that did things right.
Why don't you and I go someplace quiet? Because I'd love to give you the lowdown on Mitchell.
Big V, Jack Vincent.
Joining me now, the director of L.A. Confidential, Curtis Hanson. Welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
It's my favorite film that I've seen out so far. Let me just talk a little bit about you coming to this film. I mean, take me back to the first time the idea of this film entered your head.
James Ellroy's novel, L.A. Confidential. I read it for pleasure. I'd read half a dozen of his other books. I was not looking for a movie at the time. But what happened is, as I read his book, I just got hooked on these characters. And what I thought was Ellroy's incredible accomplishment was that each one of these characters, as I met them, I didn't like them. And I kept thinking, maybe I'll like the next one. And I kept going. And even though I didn't like them, I found that as I read the novel, I got hooked on them, emotionally involved with each and every one of them until I cared deeply about them. And I thought, if I could capture these characters in a movie and let the movie audience have the emotional reaction to them that I did, I would have a unique movie.
But you got a problem. And your problem is this is a big book with lots of characters and a complex story. And you're a storyteller, but you got to tell a story in a 2-hour movie.
Big problem. Ellroy does not write books that are blueprints for movies. Right. That's why they're such rich, rewarding reading experiences. Luckily, I teamed up with Brian Helgeland, great screenwriting partner, and we just attacked it, letting the characters be our guide. In other words, if a scene or subplot did not enhance the emotional life of the characters, then it became suspect and either had to go or be reinvented so that it did. Big job. It took us about a year to come up with a script that we were happy with.
You're willing to avoid the major Hollywood sort of demand to have one big star.
That's part of the attraction of the project. You know, we're in a time when so many movies are very linear in their plot line, and they're built around one character, usually a sympathetic male, a movie star. Right. And for me and for Brian, the attraction of L.A. Confidential was to do something that's about a group of characters, each of whom is equally complex, each of whom is the star of his own story.
How do you sell that?
With some difficulty. With some difficulty. First I had to sell it to get the money to make the movie, right. And then of course the distribution company has to sell it to the public, because it's not an easy hook. If you don't have the big star, or a movie with a plot, like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, for instance, was a movie that was very easy to summarize in one marketable phrase. Right. And then the movie's
What's
either...
the one marketable phrase? The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, or...?
Turn your back on someone you trust.
Okay.
Look out.
Right.
And then the movie's either a good version of that or it's not. L.A. Confidential, you can't sum up that way, which is what was exciting about it to me.
How did you sell it?
I recognized that as soon as you mention period, Los Angeles, crime, everybody starts thinking of the world of Raymond Chandler, whether it be The Big Sleep or the revisionist look at it, Chinatown. And movies that have attempted to revisit that world have usually done badly at the box office. So that was the other hurdle I had to overcome. What I wanted to do was sell the fact that L.A. Confidential takes place not in the Depression years of the 30s, not in the World War II years of the 40s, but in fact the boom years of the 50s. So I put together a group of photographs, some of which I'd had for years, others I gathered just for this purpose. I mounted each of them on a piece of poster board and assembled them so that I could go through them, tell a little of the story, illustrate the theme, and show what the movie would look and feel like, and that it would be a much more lurid, entertaining, even funny world than what one usually thinks of when they think of classic film noir.
And that's what we have here.
We have a mini version of it here.
Give me the version.
And this presentation, by the way, which I made to Arnon Milchan, whose company Regency financed the picture for the first time, I then made with each of my collaborators as they came on board, including the actors, because I wanted each person that I was working with to understand the movie that I was hoping to make before we set out on this journey.
Before you set out on this journey of telling me this story, I should point out you are a child of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Did not
Second
go to
generation.
Didn't go to high school. Dropped out of high
Went to
school.
high school, but didn't finish.
Didn't finish. Worked around, got involved in the movie business one way or the other, but loved the sights and sounds and feel and smell of the city.
Very much so. Miss what's gone, what's destroyed in Los Angeles, but still love the ever-changing present city as well.
So what do you say here?
And this presentation, I should say, also evolved into the opening title sequence of the movie. Right. Danny DeVito now says a version of what I'm going to say to you. Right. In fact, this postcard is, in fact, the first shot in the movie. Yeah. Danny DeVito, I mean, you don't see his hand, but you see this postcard and you hear his voice say, "Come to Los Angeles." Yeah. The beaches are wide and inviting. Yeah. The orange groves stretch as far as the eye can see. Yes. These, of course, are vintage postcards. These are from newspapers, magazines of the period. Land is cheap. Every working man can have his own house. This is the dream of suburbia, of course. And in every house, the happy all-American family. Right. Then I showed some pages of Confidential magazine, which is the real magazine that in our movie, DeVito edits Hush Hush magazine, right. Which was the, let's say, birthplace of modern tabloid journalism. Confidential magazine was the first one to sort of peel back the image that had been created by the studio-controlled fan magazines and tell the truth of what was going on underneath. DeVito says, that's the image that they're selling you of Los Angeles. Now we're going to peel back that image and show you what's really going on. Right. Movie stars are using drugs.
Robert Mitchum coming out of prison.
From his marijuana bust. Pacific Coast jazz, played by the likes of Chet Baker, Jerry Mulligan, and so forth, who, by the way, provide much of the music on the soundtrack of L.A. Confidential. This is Johnny Stompanato, dead a few years after our movie takes place on the floor of Lana Turner's house. One of the interesting things about Elroy is that he mixes fact with fiction. He takes real characters like Stompanato and Mickey Cohen, who appear in the book and movie L.A. Confidential, and then weaves in the fictional characters.
Right. Stompanato was a guy who was killed by either Lana Turner or her daughter.
Yes.
Right.
This is an actor of the early 50s named Aldo Ray. Right. I had this shot here to show what our character, Bud White, played by Russell Crowe, would look like in his civilian clothes. Point being, look at the clothes, look at the haircut. Accurate to the 50s, but like everything else in the movie, the accent is on those things in the 50s that were modern, that were forward-looking, that still feel contemporary today. Right. Again, wanting to avoid the classic film noir of the 40s and 30s. Movie star glamour from the previous decade, the 40s, this is what we were not doing in the movie, except where Kim Basinger's character, who, as you know, plays a hooker that looks like Veronica Lake and sells that resemblance to her customers, she creates this aura of fantasy and illusion and sells it, right. But L.A. Confidential, the movie, and its characters are what's going on behind this illusion.
You make this presentation larger.
Yes.
Arnold says what?
He said, let's make it.
And you said, but...
I said, but you haven't read the script yet. He said, I don't need to. I see the movie in your pictures and in your eyes.
And that says something about him, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
You know, he trusted you at that point.
He trusted me.
He saw passion in you.
He saw passion in me. He referenced another director that he worked with in his beginnings as a producer, which was Sergio Leone. Arnon's first production was Once Upon a Time in America that Sergio Leone directed, and he said, I feel the same way about this project as I felt about that one. Talk's cheap, of course. When he was put to the test was when I told him how I wanted to cast the movie. And my dream was to find a couple of actors to play the parts played by Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce that the audience didn't already have an emotional history with, that they didn't already feel they knew well. And the miracle is, not only did I get to make the movie, but I got to cast it the way I wanted to.
All right, speaking of casting, this is a scene between Vincennes, played by Kevin Spacey, and Hudgens, played by Danny DeVito, where they orchestrate the arrest of two young stars on marijuana charges. Roll tape. We'll talk about casting when we come back.
You like it, Jackie boy?
Yeah, subtle.
Casting of Spacey.
Isn't he great?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, yeah. An obvious choice for you, the only choice you had?
Kevin's an actor I'd wanted to work with for 10 years, and I could never get anybody to approve him. I wanted to work with him before he'd done a movie. Yeah. And as he said to me, he said, Curtis, we finally get to work together after he's won his Oscar, but now they have to pay me a lot more money. But, you know, watching that scene, it just reminds me, when I met Kevin for the first time on this project, I handed him the script, and I said, when you read this, think of 2 words, Dean Martin. And he says, Dean Martin? I said, Dean Martin, the essence of 50s hip, the laid-back guy who has the world on the string, knows the answer to every question. And Kevin goes, you mean the cool guy that we wanted to be when we grew up?
You got it.
And he took that bit of direction and just ran with it.
Okay, next clip. This shows a couple of the other actors I want to see. One is Bud White, played by Russell Crowe. Roll tape, and we'll see another scene giving you a feeling for this movie as well as introducing you to some of the characters. Here it is.
I'm not sure.
But you did it anyway.
Yeah. Just like the half-dozen guys you screwed today.
Well, actually, it was only 2.
You still get something when you watch this, don't you?
I do. I'm so proud of these actors. I'm just so proud of the work they did on this.
Bud White first, played by Russell Crowe.
I had seen Russell do an Australian movie called Romper Stomper, where he played a neo-Nazi skinhead. I knew he could do the brutal side of Bud White. Whether he could play the scene we just saw or not, I didn't know. Brought him over from Australia, met him, talked to him, worked with him, put him on tape, ultimately doing a couple of scenes, and showed those to my financial partners and said, this is the Bud White for me.
They said?
They said, I mean, they couldn't deny how the power and it was consistent with my dream of how to cast this movie. And, you know, they gulped a little bit and said, because this was our first hire, this was the foundation we were building the whole cast on, and they said, okay.
Kim Basinger, they are saying that this film, turns your career around.
Whatever happens from this film, Kim did. You know, Charlie, to me, the theme of the movie, the theme, back to Elroy's novel, the difference between how these characters appear and how they really are, image and reality. Kim, I didn't know at all. I wanted her to play this part for a variety of reasons. I thought more than almost any actress or woman alive, she would recognize that a powerful image, like Veronica Lake had and like she herself has, is both an asset and a trap. And I thought, if I gave her the opportunity to play the image that she's selling to her customers and also play the truth behind the image, she might blossom as an actress and show us something that we hadn't seen before. What I was not prepared for, because I didn't know her at all, I only knew her through her image, through her reputation, was the degree to which, as an actress, she just presented herself to me with this unbelievable amount of trust. It was almost unnerving, and I think it shows in every frame of her performance. It's like naked truth, an absence of technique. I mean, she's not hiding in the slightest.
Roll tape. This is a scene in which you'll meet Ed Exley, played by Guy Pearce and Bud White. And what this film in the end comes up about, in part, is the relationship between these 2 men. Roll tape. What influenced you most as a filmmaker? What's made, you know, what'd you go to school on?
Life.
Yeah.
Life. I mean, I love storytelling. I love storytellers. As a kid, I read as much as I saw movies. You know, I love the great novelists and I love the great movie makers. The ones that I liked the most, novelist or filmmaker, were the ones that were the entertainers who entertained you and at the same time gave you something else.
The James Cagney types, or you mean, or what?
Well, I mean, Mark Twain.
Oh, you mean the writers? Yeah.
The writers. Yeah. Dickens, Balzac, Jack
Yeah.
London when I was a kid in movies, John Ford, Howard Hawks, Sam Fuller, Don Siegel, you know.
And where did you learn to direct?
I don't know. It's like, where did I learn to write? Where does anybody learn? Where do actors learn how to act? The mechanics of directing are actually quite simple. Those I got a feel for. When I first started out, I went on sets doing photojournalism, and I took pictures on sets and did interviews. And so that gave me the opportunity to be around and watch the machinery move a little bit. But beyond that, it's storytelling, whether it's with the typewriter or the camera.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in. What's the difference between the mechanics, understanding the mechanics, which lots of people can, and being able to tell a story well? I mean, what's that about?
I think if you can tell a story well, you can tell it with whatever the equipment is, as I say, whether it's a typewriter, whether it's a camera, whether it's the music, whether it's the editing, it's all part of the storytelling process. I don't really differentiate the beginning or the end, which is why I like all phases of movie making equally.
So preparing the film, shooting the film, and editing the film for you are equally satisfying?
Yes, I like them all. I mean, working with the actors is the most gratifying to me, because then you have these collaborators who come, and even if you've invented the characters, they become the characters and give you something that you couldn't have dreamed of. And you know, that's the most exciting part, that's the magic when you see it come to life.
When they take it and run with it.
Yes, exactly. As long as they're running in the same direction that you had in mind.
Well, did you have that happen, and when they weren't moving in the same direction?
I've had it happen, not on this picture. I had a cast on this movie that is so broad on the one hand, because we have so many characters, but it's just a cast that any director would kill for, because not only are they so talented, but we were all playing notes off the same page.
When you finished shooting, did you know you had a very good movie?
Every day that we were shooting, I felt we were doing something special, and I think most of my collaborators felt that way as well.
Listen to this, and these are the last 4 films you made. Bad Influence in 1990, Hand That Rocks the Cradle in 92, River Wild in 94, action-adventure film, L.A. Confidential in 97. I mean, you are pushing at different places in different kinds of film. Is that because that's where you want to go, or is it just...
The way it works, Charlie, as a director for hire, is you get what you can get, and then you do the best you can with it, and you try to get something that you feel you can do something special with, and it takes you somewhere you want to go. The River Wild, I wanted to go to the outdoors. I wanted to make a modern Western, if you will. I wanted to make a movie with the river as a main character. L.A. Confidential, I told you, it was because the characters fascinated me, and it was the opportunity also to deal with my hometown, Los Angeles, at that magic moment in time when much of it was being destroyed to make way for all the people that were coming there to get the very thing that was being destroyed, and also that time when so many things were starting that are still so much with us today. You know, so it's contemporary in its meaning.
The director, Curtis Hanson, the movie L.A. Confidential, and we'll be right back.